Okay, welcome everybody. Glad everybody here. Boy, has everybody had a great day so far?
Yes.
Yeah. Exodus experience. It has really been a great time. I guess if you've already had a really good day, all you can have to do is really mess that up. We're getting there. It's after lunch. Everybody's eating, And so if I'm really boring, then I'll see people nodding. I was a high school teacher for 12 years, and so I knew how to gauge my audience. If I was getting boring, I'd just look and go, oh, yeah, they're not feeling this. So then I'd start singing or something, to get their attention, keep everybody alive. So glad to everybody here. So this workshop is entitled, of course, Faith Building for Leaders. And I think I might know a little bit about that. And so that's what it's intended to do, help you find out a little bit about that, how God builds faith and also why he does it. And so whether you're one of the biblical characters, like Moses or Abraham, Esther, Mary, Peter or Paul, unless you're one of those people, then you'll see that he has the same plan for us. And that's why I love this theme, the Exodus experience, because what we realize about the Exodus, everybody knows the story of Moses, and he brought these people out of captivity and was taking them to the promised land. That same thing happens in each and every one of our lives. I mean, we've all been in circumstances and situations where we were captive and we needed to be delivered. And amazingly, sometimes we've been the deliverer, we've been Moses. Sometimes we've been the delivered, such as the Hebrews, the children of Israel. So that's what we'll kind of look at today, how God, through that process, is really building faith so that we can be the deliverers. All right? That's what this leadership session is about. So by way of background, here's kind of my background. I do have a little bit of leadership background. I've got 2 advanced degrees in leadership, as it shows there. And then I was in the Marine Corps for 20 years. I taught high school for 12 years. And so that was the challenge of leadership. And then the ultimate leadership, of course, is my wife, 2 daughters, grandson, son-in-law, adopted son. Those are all the people you see there in the picture. And so that's the ultimate in leadership. And so leadership happens really everywhere. One of the things I used to do when I was a high school teacher is I always used to bring in, I said, I need to find a housewife to come in here so they can understand what real leadership is. I said, because leadership happens everywhere. And so even in those situations, I think God does a lot in building our faith in order to perform those leadership tasks. And so that's what we're here, and we'll talk about that today and tell you how uniquely God is preparing you for the Exodus experience in your life. And so I'm going to have a good time talking about it. And I sometimes if I start talking too fast, slow me down, I get really excited and I start telling stories. And my wife is usually in the room to both keep me on track time-wise and to keep me on topic. Because my high school students used to call me the tangential teacher. Because then I get a tangent and they loved it. Because you're speaking on one thing and then you head down this road and they're like, he's so far off. But I'm loving it, because I get to going really emotional. I get it going, telling this good story. And they're like, oh, this is good. This is better than the stuff you've been teaching us, So they get into that. So my wife's not here to keep me on topic today. So if I start wandering off, somebody needs to go, hey, come on, get back on. Hey, back over this way. Tom, you do that. Tom, give me the high sign. Back this way, okay?
What's the motion for slowing down like this?
Yeah, that'll be the motion for slowing down. This is the one, get back on track, whatever. So everybody's going to be part of this. So we're all working this thing together. So that's going to be great, all right? All right, so let's talk about this Exodus experience, this faith building. Let's talk about faith building for leaders and what really makes that so special. I think once you hear faith building for leaders, then there are 2 things that are part of that. Number one, that there are certain people who are called leaders. A lot of people think that, I'm not a leader, And so we're going to tackle that leadership dimension. But then there's another thing that's about faith. And so how does that relate to this thing of leadership? So faith and leadership. So let's talk about what makes those 2 things so special when we talk about faith building for leaders. You see on the picture there, a lot of people, and of course everybody would talk to those people about being leaders. All of them have been identified as leaders, and maybe for a lot of different reasons. And so when you start talking about faith building, the question is, what prepared them uniquely for the leadership that they had to accomplish? And I think we can talk about them from a faith perspective, but we'll talk about some of the biblical characters today as we go through this, okay? So what are those 2 dynamics? And the first one is that leadership thing. Who really are the leaders? And when you understand how leaders, that there are in fact real leaders, then you know that leadership is a thing. Because some people think that, anybody could be a leader. But there's some people, let's think about it. Moses, Moses was prepared to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. He was prepared for that. And there could have been a lot of other people who could have done it, but God chose Moses. And so God divinely chooses authority. And so we need to understand that if we're followers, we need to understand that if we're leaders, that God has chosen you to be in that position to lead. If you're the father in the home, if you're at a job and you got a particular position, God put you there for a reason, you know? And like I was saying, moms, everybody is in that position for a reason, and you've got to understand that. Because if you understand that, then you're going to be prepared for the second thing that needs to happen. And the second thing is that I know that I'm in this leadership position, then I have a sense of responsibility. And responsibility is where it comes down to leadership, all right? Because responsibility and a leader has something nobody else has, and that is that thing at the bottom there, accountability. Because that is the reckoning. A lot of people can go out like, you know, you had the 49ers go out and play in the Super Bowl game or whatever. Yeah, the players, they're making millions of dollars. They played and they lost or whatever. But nobody just said, hey, well, you know, you lost the game for us. It's your fault or whatever. They started talking about the coach. Shanahan, you made some terrible calls. Why did you go away from the run? Everybody blames that leader because the leader has the ultimate accountability. That accountability is that reckoning. So when you're in a leadership position, then you've got the ultimate responsibility because somebody's going to come to you and say, hey, it's time for you to be held accountable. It's amazing. And I just use sports because I played sports and I like sports or whatever. But they always come and they fire the coach. I mean, they fired the coach, you know. And I ran a barbecue business, a barbecue restaurant for a while. And I used to talk up to my manager, my general manager. I used to say, you know what? My philosophy is, you know, if you're not firing people that need to be fired, then you need to be fired. You know, there's that accountability. There's that accountability, and it happens at all levels, you know. And so we got to understand that, and that's really important for leaders. And I think when you bring it into the faith realm, that's really big because the scripture has some particular statements there that are cautions, I think, to leaders. And look at this passage, Acts 20. It says, take heed, therefore, unto yourselves and to all the flock over which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers. If God has put you in this position to oversee something, you need to understand that's serious. And in this particular case, he says to feed the church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood. He draws the equivalency of the fact that because I did this, now you have a responsibility. And you better take that seriously. All right. And then the second passage is talking about children. But I think this one is really huge in that it's talking about us being children. It says, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as a little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whosoever shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones, which believes in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck than that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. It's talking about if we take someone who's seen as a child of God, or if we take someone who's seen as a servant to us, and we're in this leadership position, and we take advantage of that, that's a very bad thing. That's a very bad thing. I got a quick story, which is a terrible story, but it displays what's going on here. I was a JRTC instructor at Tomball Memorial High School. There were two of us, and so my assistant was there, and he was having inappropriate relationships with some of the kids in the school. Totally unbeknown, and we had been there for 5 years. And so one day, the principal came in and grabbed my assistant and took him out, and I was going, hey, what's going on, sir? He eventually let me know. It took 2 years for it to go to trial or whatever. I was the final witness, and his defending attorney on the stand asked me this particular question and said, but he was military, so do you think we should give some leeway? And I said, absolutely not. I said, the standard is higher, not lower. That was more egregious because of the responsibility that he had to someone's children, and I think that's the statement that God is making here. The caution to leaders is the standard is not lower when you're in a leadership position. It's higher. All right. So we kind of need to understand that. And so let's go ahead and let's talk about, that's the responsibility. Now let's talk about this faith dimension. All right. Because this faith dimension, and we want to first of all define what faith really is. And I think that the Hebrews passage does the best job of simply defining what it is, even though it sounds kind of strange. And I'm a King James person, so I like the King James version. I always like that. It sounds more artistic. All right. But it says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And I think that's so huge because when you think about faith, it's what you don't see. You don't see it, so what do you have to go on? You have to go on the substance. And the substance is things that I hope for. But if you place your hope in the right place, then you got a great hope. All right. But it's a thing that's not seen. And how do you get it? So he talks about how you get it. And it says it comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. But then here's the ultimate one that we're going to talk about. Why do you need it? Because you can't do, because without it, it's impossible to please God. Wait, now there are two things that are going on here. First of all, I can't see this thing. So it says it's the evidence of things not seen. So I just got to believe. And if I have this kind of feeling where I just believe and I don't see it, then that's the only thing that I can please God with. That's the only thing that's pleasing to God, because it says without faith, it's impossible to please God. So I have got to have a faith that doesn't see this thing. So that's kind of tough. That's tough because, so I can't please God with just my good works. And everybody says, wow, he did this, he did that. I can really please God by believing in these things that I don't see. All right. Now, so that's the difference between leadership, the kind of leadership that's out there in the world, and the faith leadership that we're talking about. And so ultimately, God, so the question is, why would God then, we're talking about faith building for leaders, why would God take us to a place? Is that really progress when we go to a place where we don't see things, but we believe more? That's what God's saying. We don't see as much, we believe more, and it's about this belief. And everybody says, well, yeah, I believe this, I believe that. Well, you got to question, what kind of belief are you talking about, though? And so that's what we're going to talk about today, how God does that. Now, I'll talk about it. I think there's this process. And so, now this is nothing that you're going to find anywhere else, because I made this up, all right? So I made this up. But I analyzed it, and you'll be able to, after we get out of here, you'll be able to analyze every biblical character. And I didn't analyze every biblical character, because that's a long process. But I started thinking about some of them, and some that I'm not using today, but almost every one of them kind of fits this dimension. There's this before the call. So God's doing this faith building, and that's all I'm talking about. And hopefully I've got enough time at the end to give you all a really good story. It's not going to be a tangent. It's going to be a good story. You'll love the story at the end if I got time. So I'm going to try to make sure there's time. He's my time guy, because I got a new time. That's my wife back there, Melanie. And I told him my wife is usually here to keep me on track and time-wise, but you weren't here, so I figured I was in trouble. So he's got the duty over there. He's going to hold up my time thing. So
talk fast so we can get the story.
Yeah, all right. So you want to get to the story. Yeah. So, but he's giving me the 10-minute hack and the 5-minute hack. So I'll be good. So I'll cut to the story. All right. So, but here's the deal. So you got this thing before the call. Then you've got the call. Then you've got the deliverance. And then you've got the walk. Okay. So, if you think about it, and if you quickly, everybody knows the story of Moses, but that's kind of like what happened. If we analyze that, we'd say, yeah, there was this thing that happened before the call. There was the call that he made. Everybody knows the burning bush. There was deliverance, and then there was the walk of faith. And so this is the pattern that happens in all of our lives. So let's talk about each one, all right? And here's the cool thing, that before the call, way back when, then God was already preparing. Think about it. When Moses came onto the scene, was born, what was happening with the other babies that were his age? They were being killed. Remember that? They were being killed. So God had already decided, I'm going to take this one, and because I've got this plan, because God knows the end from the beginning, he said, I've got this plan. I'm going to take him, put him in the little basket, and I guess I'll spend some time reading that scripture so you can really feel what we were talking about here. But he was uniquely, he not only did he save him at that point, kept him alive when the other was being killed, but he was beginning to prepare him. Because I love the end of this, and I'm going to and read through this passage right quick. It says, and there went a man of the house of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein. She laid it in the flags by the river's brink, and his sisters stood afar off to wit that would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him. That's God was doing that. She had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Now they knew the Hebrews' children had been getting slaughtered, all right? But didn't happen here. Had compassion on him. God did that, okay? Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Now, how amazing is that? How is it? We find a random child. You have the daughter over there watching, and Pharaoh's daughter says, hey, yeah, go and get someone. So not only was Moses in a divine place and divinely inspired, His sister was right there. The daughter was right there. Oh, I'll go get a Hebrew woman. And who does he go get? The mom. That's amazing. That's just minor detail, but that's amazing and shows how God's providence through all of that. Way before Moses is a little toddler. He hadn't even thought about leading children of Israel out of bondage. Okay, all right. And so what we do then, this is all before the call. And one of the things that happens before the call, because at this point now, let's go a whole lot of years down the road, and Moses he's grown up and he's doing his thing. He's in the Egyptian kingdom there doing his thing or whatever. And this is what I think God uses to propel us into this place where we will receive the call. And he creates this, what I call this good failure. This good failure. I used to tell people, hey, when you fail good. Fail good. Because all failure is not bad. There's some really good failure. And Moses had some good failure, because Moses, what does he do? Moses is like, hey, I'm feeling my Hebrew side. And he goes out one day and he, spots something going on with some of his Hebrew brethren, and he takes up for them. And in doing so, he kills an Egyptian, because Moses has to realize at this point that, these guys, there's some bad stuff going on. You kind of guys are kind of cruel to these Hebrews. Why are you so cruel? And these are my brethren. And so Moses kind of feels that, and he kills the Egyptian. And so this is what I call the hot water wake-up call, where Moses is like, hey, I'm in trouble. And so in that passage, it says, it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting in Hebrew one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Now, that's what I say such good failure, because Moses believes nobody sees this. I look this way, I look that way, and so I'm going to go for it, all right? And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together, and he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And Moses was a great good guy, too, because he's like, hey, guys, stop fighting each other. We don't care, Moses, we don't care. And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedest the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. And now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Moses, welcome to stage number 2, all right? Moses is stage number 2 because Moses, now while he's in Midian, this is the place where he's going to get the call. So this failure, which we thought was a bad thing, is the thing that God is using to prepare us to this position for where he's going to take us, all right? So he's getting Moses ready. And at this point, definitely unbeknownst to Moses, all Moses knows is that was a pretty little girl who brought me that drink of water. Hey, man, where's your dad? Let's go hang out with him. And so she goes and then he begins to live with his father-in-law, hanging out with his father-in-law while he's dwelling there with his wife, and he has family and all this. And then he has this magical day where the call happens. And everybody knows the story of the burning bush. And the call happens. You got a question?
Yeah, while he was there with the father-in-law, how much credibility do you give tending sheep for 20 years to be leadership?
Outstanding. And that's the thing. So he's out there leading these sheep. Very good point. He's out there leading these sheep. And why is that going to be important? Because you're going to be leading millions when they come out, Not only that, to the other point, and when you're growing up in Egypt and you're learning the system of government there and you're having to deal with Pharaoh because you're there and all this stuff, you're learning the system of government there in Egypt. Now you're going to tend to sheep. Wow. And this is what we need to do in our lives today. Maybe those things are connected. I wonder if Moses ever thought, because the Hebrews talked about a Messiah to come. They always talked about a Messiah to come, especially those in bondage always talked about a deliverer. I wonder if he went, I wonder if God's got, I wonder if I'm that guy. I wonder if I'm that guy. Anybody ever had that? I wonder if I'm that guy. Think about that. Because if you started analyzing your life, then, I was in this thing, then I was in that thing. And we got a problem in our society this way. Maybe I'm that guy. Maybe I'm that girl. Maybe, So that's a very good point. Because at some point he's beginning to get this. So here's what happens then. So it's time now for the call. And the call comes when, I might have thought about that before, but now God's going to make it so plain and clear to me. And so he sees the bush burning, and so we get this passage. Moses was keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, don't miss out on that minor detail there. Sometimes the bush is burning and people are not turning aside to see. In this particular case, it says, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here am I. And he said, draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. All right, so think about how, at this point now, God enters into this new relationship. And Moses really, of course, a burning bush is not being consumed would convince probably a lot of people. But he enters in this new relationship because God speaks to him and says, the place where you're standing is holy ground. And he reveals himself, says, who I am. I am the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he enters in this thing. He's got this great new relationship. All right. So that's the first part of the call. He does that. So he enters into the second part of the call. So after he reveals himself and says, now I'm going to give you this supernatural task. And this is where the faith part comes. Because remember, we talked about faith is believing in this thing that you cannot see. It's the evidence of things not seen. So God does that in our lives. And think about your own life. What is that thing that God has given you that you can't imagine? That people said, no, I can't see that. You can't see that. But God has come to you and said, you're going to have to do this. And you're like, but God, I'm not capable. God, I don't have my bank account's not big enough. I don't have the qualifications for that job. I don't have this, whatever. Because why would God simply come to you and say, hey, I need you to go take out the trash just like you did yesterday when he has this super call. He wants to do something that you would go, oh, God, I can't do that. You've taken out the trash 1,000,000 times. You know how to do that. What about this thing that I really don't think I have the ability to do? That's the second part of the call. Because he's telling Moses, by the way, Moses, and see, because Moses hadn't put it together like we just did in here and said, he spent all that time in Egypt. He spent all that time tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, in Midian. So, wow, he wasn't putting that together to say, I'm really prepared to lead the children of Israel out of bondage in Egypt. I'm prepared for that. He wasn't saying that, but that's what God was preparing him for. So God is uniquely preparing us for the supernatural task. And so when you look at these two particular scriptural passages there, it gives us a new level of trust in God. And he tells him, he says, come now, therefore, and I will send you unto Pharaoh that you may bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said to God, who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And the part that's not written in the Bible, God said, look, you see what I did with you? I saved you when you were a child, when you were born. I put you there in Egypt so you get some knowledge. I put you over there to tend the sheep with your father so you be prepared for it. And now I've spoken to you in the burning bush. What else do you need? And that's what he does with us. If we really put it together, it's like, oh, God. Oh, you have me ready. And we'd be really ready to step out if we saw how God put it together, all right? And here's the deal. This is the other part that we realize soon, though, once we get to this point. This is why faith is so important. Because when we hear God, we begin to believe him. It says, and they shall hearken to thy voice, and thou shalt come, thou and the elders of Israel, unto the king of Egypt, and you shall say unto him, the Lord God of the Hebrews hath met with us. And now let us go, we beseech thee, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. And listen to this. This is the tricky part. And I'm sure, this is God talking, and I'm sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, not by a mighty hand. He's not going to let you go. By the way, all right, so God tells you, hey, I want you to go and do this thing. And by the way, you're going to fail. By the way, it's not going to work. By the way, it's not going to happen. You think we're going to be really ready to go? Hey, I want you to go over here. I want you to tell this guy, let my people go. You're bold, Moses. You're big. You go tell that guy. Because remember, Moses was scared in the first place going, who am I to go to Pharaoh? This guy's got Egypt. Egypt is huge. They're running the world. I need to go to him. Yeah, and by the way, go tell him what I said. Because what is he doing? The same thing he's doing with us. He's teaching obedience, not success. All right? Or I could say he's teaching obedience as success. See, because we don't need to worry so much about the outcome. We need to worry about the order. All right? God gives us the order, and he takes care of the outcome. All right? So he gives us the order. And so think about, as we talk about faith building, this is what he's doing. This feeling of uncomfortableness with what we see and what our abilities are is a good thing. Is a good thing. In America, we're so consumed with having the qualifications, the background, the credentials for everything, that it hamstrings us because we think that if we don't have that, we can't. But God is teaching us something different. He's saying, you can because of me. You can because you can believe in me. You can be because of your faith. Because trusting in me, though not seeing, but believing, is the work that I've called you to do. All right? And that's one for us to think about. All right? And so that's when he finally, enters into stage 3. All right? And in stage 3, then here's the deal. God delivers on his promises. And here's the cool thing about when God delivers on his promises. We talk about, I think the end for Moses was when Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt. All right? Because Moses, remember, we talk about how obedience is success. Moses, and most of us would say, yeah, but Moses never got into the promised land. So some people would say that was a failure. God was preparing him, and he's preparing you and me for a specific part. And remember, God lives in eternity. So it's not like there's an end to his plan, because check this out, which is amazing. Guess who shows up at the transfiguration? Yes. So it's not like we think it's over. And in our lives, I'm going to tell you quickly about my wife, even though she's standing here, whatever. But this is such a good, it works for my message, honey, so just deal with it, all right? Hey, we start watching a football game. And it's like, so whoever team she's rooting for, it's the first quarter. The other team scores 2 touchdowns. She's done. She feels like it's over. And I go, the game is still going on. How could you give up so? And so forget about the fourth quarter. If her team is down in the fourth quarter, she never would have believed the Chiefs would come back. She'd have had them buried in the first half. That's the way she is. And so many people are like that. But the reality is that in God's timetable, it's never over. It's never over. I was talking to a guy in one of the other sessions about, there's a guy, Simon Sinek, and he wrote this, he talks about the infinite life, and so, because she thinks I'm too optimistic, I go, well, it's never over. God, I don't care. I said, we might have lost the game today, but I feel like it's still being played. And that's where we are as Christians in life. Whatever happened today was simply for today. Life is eternal for the believer, and my victory comes tomorrow, for sure. Because God's always got victory, because that's our destiny, all right? So that's what happens in the deliverance, and think about all those things. We look at that as a moment of time, when Abraham had his son Isaac, he could have said that was it, But of course, there was going to be more after that, because he said, your descendants shall be as much as the sand on the beach, or whatever, same type of philosophy. When Joseph became second in command in Egypt, that could have been the end for him. But remember, he'd been through a lot. So all these things are points in time where people really saw after they believed. Because remember, and Joseph is a great story. And like I said, you take those 4 things that we talked about in this process and apply them to anybody. Because Joseph is my favorite Bible story, by the way. It's just great. Because for all the ups and downs, from the time he was in the pit to the time he went to Potiphar's house to prison and then to the palace. I mean, he just kept doing what God called him to do. And I think using his skills, all right? And so but here's the last one, though, because I think Moses, like we were saying, Moses didn't get into the promised land, but he led them out. He did all the things that God had prepared him to do. And so ultimately, then he's enshrined, of course, in I call the Hall of Faith. The Hall of Faith that's in Hebrews 11, along with a lot of other biblical characters. And the opportunity for you and me to be enshrined in that as well. If we understand that God is preparing us uniquely, specifically, with the places that we've been, because way before we understood who God was and what he was doing with us, he was already preparing us to the point now where we can begin to hear his voice and hear him, and then he's putting us through more circumstances. Put those things together, and you'll see that God is preparing us for the Exodus experience in our lives. And not only will you come out, but you're leading people out along with you, okay? So I wanted to leave some time so I could tell the story, all right? So I'm doing this thing called Erase Race, okay? And Erase Race is designed to do away with the concept of race in our society. And I'm telling you, so when I talk about faith building for leaders, this is serious, because, see, and here's a tangent, okay? I'm on a tangent. because my tangent is this. I was out on the tour, did all these cities, 112 cities, 48 states. I went from June to December. My wife hated I was gone, whatever, and she was just always spazzing out because I wasn't home, whatever. But so when I was out there, then I was like, before I went, I was stressed out about, do I have everything together? Do we have all this? I have a small staff, and one lady works in Florida, another guy in California, and they were saying, maybe we should wait a little while longer and get things in order and things like that. And all I know was God said go. And I said, we just got to go. I said, I know we don't have everything prepared, and we got to go. We got to go. All right, so I did that, went out to do the 112 cities. I came back. I went to this church. We were visiting a church. My wife and I bounce around. We visit lots of churches as part of our ministry. We went to this church. This guy I had not seen in months. I had not seen him probably in 4 or 5 months. He comes up to me and he went, I want to apologize to you. He said, you were here at the church and you spoke months ago, and I didn't come. I knew you were speaking, and God told me specifically to come and tell you, don't hesitate, but go. And he told me that, and I was like, I hadn't seen this guy. I hadn't seen this guy in 4 months. He said, and I just wanted to know that, did you go on that journey you were supposed to go on? And I was like, yeah, I went because I knew God said go. He said, wow, I'm so grateful. He said, because I was disobedient. God told me to come to church to tell you that you were supposed to go. And I was like, I was shocked. I was like, wow, I'm glad I went, really, really glad I went. Okay, so now back on my real topic, okay? So as I went around, and this is my last story, and so I think I'll make time, okay? All right, so I was doing all these cities, and my wife said, when you go, it would be good for you to try to hit some of the historical sites. My campaign is to do away with the concept of race, and first of all, I believe that race is not a real concept. And so we're saying, get rid of it and let's start dealing with people on the basis of humanity. We're all made in the image of God. And so I start with churches. I try to get churches, which has been very challenging. I start with churches, and I try to get churches to sign up to saying, let's stop using the term black church, white church, black people, white people. Let's stop that. Why don't we become people? Let's become people of God, So I start with the churches, and most people that go to church have jobs, and so they'll go out into the community. But we deal with all these other sectors of society as well. So that's what we're poised to do. And so I went around to the cities, meeting with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, saying, in the next few years, I'm going to be coming to your city, putting on these forums, these educational forums and things like that. So my wife would tell me, stop at some of these historical sites because you just get a better insight to America, which I really did. And so we get to Little Rock, Arkansas, and she has me go by the museum there. So I go by because that was one of the high schools, one of the first high schools in the country to get integrated in 1957. They had to get integrated with federal marshals, which was amazing. So I go there and I'm looking at this book or whatever, and I ask them, I said, do any of these people still live in this area? Some of the people that were involved there? And they said, yeah, I think this lady does. And matter of fact is that I don't have that picture here. See, that would have been a picture. I should have put that picture in there. I got it on the next slide. Here we go. Yeah, so this lady right here was still living in Little Rock. So I call my investigative wife, and I said, honey, this lady's name is Hazel Bryant. I said, can you look her up? Because she's in Texas, and I'm in Little Rock driving, and in 10 minutes, my wife is like a really detective. If you all did something bad, she could look you up. She could look you up, and she could give you all your info. But anyway, she says, yeah, here's her address. She got married, and here's her name now, and here's her phone number. You need to call before you go. And so, just like any good husband, I ignored the second part of what she said, except the first part. And I said, I'm not going to call her. I'm just going to go out to her house. So, as it's getting darker in Little Rock, Arkansas, I'm this guy, and you see my vehicle that I'm riding around in. So I'm driving in this vehicle, and I drive around, and I'm going out on a rural Arkansas road and drive up to this lady. This lady, yeah, people point out, driving up to this lady who is now 77 years old. I'm driving up to her house. I walk into the screen and porch. I knock on the door, and this guy, and he wasn't smiling then, he comes to the door and goes, what do you want? And I go, whoa, okay. I said, hey, well, I was just at the museum, and I talked to the people there, and they said this lady was living here, and I just wanted to see if she wanted to talk, He's like, and so he's just tearing into me. She peeks around the corner, and he's like going, how do I know you're not here to scam my wife like everybody else and all this? And I go, hey. And so I had to give this really short pitch on the race movement and things like that. So that happens, and long story short, we become great friends. 2 hours later, you see it's dark now. This is outside. She's showing me around her house, telling me about her family and all this, whatever. And this is this lady. And she was 15 years old in the picture, and everybody's amazed at how, wow, kids really looked more mature back then. You know what I mean? You know, but she's 15, and this happened 1957. She's still carrying the scars today. Which is the saddest thing. As I sat there and talked to her about this lady, who was also there, you know, she talks about how their relationship is still strained, and how every talk show for the last 40 years she's been on, from Oprah Winfrey to everything else, everybody beats her up for that picture. And I said, can you imagine that pain of 15 years, at 15 years old, and somebody holding that over you until you're in your 70s? You know, that's got to be painful. And I told her, I said, well, hey, next time I come back to visit you, I'll bring some barbecue from Texas, and you'll be happy, you know, whatever. And so we became good friends. And that's just one of the things that happened while I was out on the road. And I think about how that would have never happened if I had hesitated, if I had not just heard God say, go. If I had thought, but I'm not prepared, I'm not ready, and I wouldn't have gone. And so that's what I mean about the Exodus experience. That's why this Exodus experience is so great, because it's saying that God has already got, this might be a newsflash for you, but God is way ahead of us. He's way ahead of us. He's already got prepared, you know. What we need to do is be sensitive to hearing him and really being comfortable with faith. That's what we got to do. Because be comfortable with faith, because amazingly, the faith building process is building less security in who we are and more security in who he is. So we don't have to see all the things that we have prepared. We don't have to see how ready we are. We just need to know that he says go, because when he says go, we don't need to worry about anything else. He's got it taken care of. So that's it. Now I probably got a couple of minutes for questions or anything like that. And so I'm glad I was able to rush through. I was talking really fast because, you know, that's what I have to do in order to get, so I can get to the story, you know. But this was a story, which is a great story. And I just love telling it because it speaks to us about connecting with people. You know, it's connecting. She wasn't entertaining me because I was black, of course. You know, she wasn't. And I wasn't entertaining her because she was white. It was because we are human beings and we need to connect with each other. And that's what life is really about. Okay, yes, sir.
So you're telling us that all the sum total of life, all the good things, all the bad things, all the good people, all the bad people, everything that's ever happened, I don't know. God is a preparation for us, and now we find ourselves in your classroom. What's your message? Go.
Yes.
Go.
Yes. That's it. The message is hear God and go. I mean, it's obedience. It's hearing God say go. I think because faith kind of is opposite of our work. You know, everybody has the faith work thing, whatever. We think, and you know, if you spend a lot of time on social media, it's like we do branding, we try to scale our operation, we do all these things that are really intellectual pursuits, and you might be led to do that. But the ultimate issue is when God says go, then we got to be ready to go.
We're ready.
Yes, Tom.
So since you followed the call, what's been the biggest challenge where you had your greatest doubts about following the call?
It's the one of faith. It's saying, God, I mean, I keep telling my wife, I go, yeah, but you know, I've been trying to get, I got to spend more time fundraising. The work part, because see, I'm a worker by nature. And my wife can tell you, I mean, I will work 24 hours a day trying to make things happen. And God is having to pull me back from that and say, you got to trust and believe, you know. I want you to go here and do this thing, because I'm always going, oh, I got to do this. I got to get my fundraising plan in place. I got to go market to these people. I got to do this. And so that's the challenge. It's the challenge of faith to me, to just trust God, because I want to go and do it and make it happen. And I've learned to, and as I'm still learning through this faith thing, kind of step back and watch how God works. Because I was standing out there in the lobby, and this guy, I passed by, this guy goes, you look familiar. And I was like, well, I'm a bald head man, a lot of bald head people, you know. And he says, let me show you something. And I tell him who my name is, Carlen Charleston. And he goes and he grabs his laptop. He opens up his laptop, and on his laptop, he's got a sticky note. Looks like it's like 5 years old. It's a sticky note, and it has my name written on it. And he said, this lady gave me your name. He said, years ago, he said, and she told me to get in contact with you. She said, because the work you're doing, and you all probably work good together. I was like, that's amazing. That is amazing. And so God continually shows me those kind of things. Like, and I thought with all my effort of trying to call people, I've been rejected from people. I was calling them, trying to make things happen. And God's like, you know, I'll do this for you right here. You ain't got, you know, you're stressing out about that. Watch how I do this. That's it, the faith movement.
Yeah, I might have missed it, but I meet people and they say they might feel a call to go, to do something. But the part that holds a lot of people that I spoke to was that whole fundraising part. But like my thoughts are, the whole concept between fundraising and tent making. And so many people I see them shut down their business or their jobs, and then they wonder why I'll just say it, they're struggling financially, and they wonder, like, what happened? I thought God called me to do this. Well, maybe he did, but maybe he also didn't call you to give up your job to do it, because a lot of the ministry I find that we can do right here in our own backyard is just doable while we work within the mission field of our regular job of tent maker.
You're great, right?
And so, how would you speak to that? Like, do you observe
Yes.
this? Do you see this? And the
Yes.
struggle between, I feel called, so I
Yes.
must quit my job and people should give me money.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I just find it doesn't work that way.
Yes. Here's how it works. It works just like this. It's like, yeah, and that's why you got to interpret what God is saying in your life. Like the crisis of failure that Moses had, there was no way that Moses was going to be able to stay in Egypt after what he did. I mean, really, Pharaoh was going to kill him, and so God, and so he knew, all right, I got to go. God had already prepared Midian and Jethro or whatever for the work he was going to do there. All right. Same thing with me, is I understood that, because your point is a good one. You got to make sure you hear God. But with me, I loved where I was. I loved teaching. I would have, and I told my wife, I would have taught for life. But God was calling me out of that, and I didn't want to go because I was comfortable there. I was loving what I was doing, and I was like, and this other thing that I knew God was calling me to, I never would have had time to do. I had to leave that in order to go. And so, it's just being able to hear God for what he has for you. Because, in some cases, you could stay there. Because I'm sure it would have been great if I had stayed there. Because my wife would have said, we can pay more of our bills now. If I stayed there. Because now I'm nonprofit, whatever. So,
yeah, because ministry happens whether I work at Walmart or I quit Walmart and I say, hey, I call all my friends, say, can you give me $20 a month to do this 501c3, quote unquote. So I guess that's what I see a lot of people wrestling with. And I think we devalued to some degree the tent maker ministry when really that's what Paul did, if I understand it right. And he was free to do ministry without the constraints of a board or becoming a full-time fundraiser, which is what I found a lot of ministries would do. They want to do ministry, they have a passion, they're good at it, and then a year into it, they go, I just became a full-time fundraiser. And the thing that they're passionate and good at, they don't do it anymore. Because they have to constantly fundraise. So do you see that as a norm? And then do you feel like we really need to focus more on tent making and helping people understand we are where we are to tent make, to raise funds for our family, and to be free to do the ministry that God has called us to do without asking people to help me buy my groceries?
I don't know. I mean, think about that, though. And this is what I've kind of learned through God, is that God works best in our weakness. He works best in that uncomfortable thing. And the answer is you really just got to hear God's calling and go, because sometimes those things and our ability, in my case, a real worker, my ability will get in the way of what God really wants to do with me, because I can fix it. I can go do it. I can go. I can go work this job and whatever. And man, I can work really hard and do all these other things. But when that thing keeps me from what God wants me in a position where he can use me, I need to be usable by him. I might have to go beg for money. But God need to be usable by God, whatever it is. I need to be usable by him. And I can keep myself from being usable if I go and do all the things that I do. And so it's just a faith issue.
But by the same token, he's got a brother who God told him, your mission field is your job at the post office.
Right.
So he's been there 32, because first he's like, man, I can't work here. I can't stay in this place. And then God said, no, that's where I want you.
Yeah.
And God told him that in like year 3. He's now in year 32. Okay. So it really depends. You got to
hear God.
Hear God and hear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This is the last question.
How do you? I know you're proactive. You're the Martha of the marriage. I mean, sorry.
Yes. I got you. I got you.
Well, there's no male analogy to the Martha and Mary story. I didn't write that. Well, how do you stay personally motivated, your marriage and stuff? So if you're on, you're proactive in all this, and this is passionate, and it's from the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you find time to be still and know that I'm God?
Yeah. Well, that's the challenge.
How do you balance?
Yeah. It's very easy, because once you begin to do the faith thing, you realize I can't. Like this issue of going when I don't have everything ready. Then God gives you this thing when God says, yeah, but you got to go. then you know you don't have the, like, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, and I gotta trust. So that means if I don't know, I've gotta listen to somebody who does know. And so I'm more eager than to begin listening to God because I don't know. And because if I worked it up myself, then I don't really have to listen. I know what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go over here, I'm gonna do that, whatever. I don't have to listen. But when I don't really know, I'm listening very well. It makes me thirst more to hear him, because if I don't hear him, things are gonna go bad. I know that because I don't know what I'm doing.
And have you done that? Have you found challenges or
Oh, yes.
obstacles to not
Oh, yeah, it's
listening, not listening?
It's continual. I mean, it's continual, and so and each day I'm listening better. I mean, that's the thing, to continue. Oh yeah, that wasn't God. That wasn't God. Here's how God sounds, and you get used to His voice after a while, and you know. And because I get a lot of disagreement with on this race thing from people, and it becomes so reassuring, because when you heard God, and when you hear people say that, and I don't come at them with hate or whatever. It allows me then to continue to be Jesus to them. To go, I've got to accept them. I've got to love them. And that's when you know it's God. When people are doing or saying things that are maybe hateful, whatever, but you don't respond like you would normally respond in me. Because I'm the greatest arguer. If I married my wife and she's a lawyer and I like to argue. And so in me, I would have argued, but I don't do that anymore. I mean, I'm not gonna say I wouldn't do it. It means I'll revert it back if I did. But I respond out of love now, because I'm like, yeah, I know, but I love you, and I know we're gonna get there. Even though you disagree with me, and so it's just good. All right. So my time's up. I thank you all. Or whatever you want a business card or anything like that.